Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk about creating the kinds of always changing, wonderfully messy cities and towns that we humans clearly love. We'll talk with those people trying to revive them or create them anew, whether they be designers, developers, builders, planners, or just anyone interested in the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Hi, this is Kevin Klinkenberg. I've got a couple episodes that I recorded during this year's Strongtown's National Gathering and CNU Conference that I'm going to share with you this week and next week. So these are a little bit different. They were done a little bit more on the fly. You'll see the audio quality is a little different. But I wanted to share them with everybody because I thought the conversations were both really, really excellent. This first one is with my friend Jason Segedy, who is in Akron, Ohio. He's a former planning director for the city of Akron, and a guy that I just find to be very, very thoughtful, a deep thinker on many issues, but also exceedingly practical and just a really cool person to hang out with and talk. So we recorded this one outside at a brewery in Akron, which, by the way, had very good beer, I have to say. So I hope you enjoy this one. Take care, everybody. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg, live from Akron, Ohio today, trying an experiment. I hope this works out, but I'm sitting here with my friend Jason Segedy here in Akron. Jason, thanks for all the hospitality. This has been fantastic.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. It's great to have you here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, recording this live from, what's the name of the brewery?
Missing Falls.
Missing Falls Brewery. All right. So there might be some background noise, and hopefully we're loud enough. But if it doesn't work, we'll at least have a good conversation. So Jason's been showing me all around Akron, which has been terrific. And I'm learning a lot about this part of Ohio, which I really haven't spent much time in. So I do have some questions for you.
Fire away.
A few things that came to mind. Some as we were driving around, and just some that I thought about, like on the way up here. So I think I mentioned this in the car. It really wasn't clear to me before coming here just how close Akron is to Cleveland. And that there's this almost super region up here. I'm curious tell me something that you think you really love about Northeast Ohio, this part of the country, and something else that you think needs to improve.
Sure. So I think one thing I love kind of has to do with what you said about the closeness of those cities, is that it's really a great home base, both that we have access to. We're only 35 miles from Cleveland, so Akron's a nice mid-sized city in its own right, but anything that might not be able to be found here is just up the road, so to speak. In Cleveland and, in Canton, just south of us, 20 miles south, there's a lot of great things in Canton. So I like that you have this variety of kind of these different tiered size cities close by. And then related to that, I like that it's a good home base and just the whole scheme of things in the country, that many cities that are interesting are a day's drive. Mm-hmm. So It's very feasible to drive to New York, to Chicago, to Toronto, to Washington, D.C., Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, I could go on. But I do like that you have, really access to a lot of cool places to see in the United States. One thing I think that is a big challenge that I hope will improve is really just in the realm of the economy. That for Kevin and I were talking earlier that the whole part of this part of Ohio has lost about 7% of its population since 1970. We've been kind of on this slow but steady decline. And a lot of that is directly attributable just to the lack of jobs. This was a huge manufacturing region, and when that kind of dried up largely, just not a lot replaced it. So, I hope in the 30 or so years that I have left that we can turn that around and start to have an economic base for a lot of the working class people here that have been left behind.
So if you put all these cities together that are pretty close by, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, etc., how big is that? How many people are in that region?
So the kind of the Cleveland, Akron, Canton, it actually is like considered a consolidated statistical area in the census, not to nerd out too much, but this is the Messy City podcast, so I guess that's,
that's
okay.
You can nerd out a little.
So that metropolitan area with Cleveland, Akron, and Canton's got around like 3.3 million people. Okay. And then if you toss in Youngstown, this whole region in Northeast Ohio, we're just a shade under 4 million.
Okay. All right. So, that's a substantial amount of people. In terms of, if you were to put that together compared to other regions of the country, that's probably top 20.
Yeah, we're about, depending on how you measure it, we're about 14th or 15th as far as kind of consolidated metro areas in the country.
So you talked about the area has lost about 7% of its population since 1970. Has that slowed in last decade or two, or is it kind of the same pace?
Yeah, it has slowed. I mean, most of that loss was in the 70s and in the 80s, and things kind of stabilized here in the 90s, but even ever since the 90s, in a way, were kind of a very small resurgence for Akron and Cleveland. Both cities still lost population, but like not nearly at the pace that they had in the 70s and 80s. And then the pace picked up a little bit again after the turn of the millennium, but still a lot slower pace of loss than, say, we had right in the aftermath of the decline of the rubber industry and the steel industry. But we haven't quite been able to turn the corner as a region of just completely stabilizing and starting to attract people back.
Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the things I noted to him is that, many of these cities have the good fortune of having their boom years in years that were really great for American architecture and city design. Late 19th, early 20th century, the first 3 or 4 decades of the 20th century. So, as he drove me around the city, there's incredible bones here, just like so many cities in this part of the country. And it's you think about like some of the factors that you hope might attract younger people to a place. There is a cool factor because of just the presence of really attractive architecture and neighborhoods and parks and everything else. Do you feel like is that part of the discussion about trying to like attract people or help rebuild the region's economy?
Yeah, I think you're right that like what we have going for us, sometimes it can be cliched, but I think in our case it really is true, is that there is a very good quality of life here for like, kind of an everyday person. Yeah. That you really could have an entry-level job out of school or work a trade, and it's totally in the cards for you to be able to afford to own your own home, and even in a decent neighborhood. Unlike a lot of larger cities where you just either, a lot of California, you're just not owning your own home, or you might have to really own, rent or buy somewhere that you're afraid to, go home at night. And there's a lot of safe and attractive neighborhoods where you can afford a house easily. I think, like you said, the bones are here. I think it is just more of the challenge of there just aren't that many young people, even in the position of having that job that are coming here. So I think a lot of, I think that kind of comes back to what I mentioned about the economy of just kind of working on creating more jobs that can attract that person, and maybe even just as large of an issue, retain people, because we still lose a lot of younger people to, I'm not so sure to the coasts anymore, but to Columbus, Columbus, Chicago, Washington D.C. And so I think that's really, it's both the retention and the attraction that we will have to work on.
So I came up here today from the Strong Towns National Gathering and the CNU conference, and there was it just kind of this conversation kind of reminds me. There was the session I was in, I was listening to with that Monty Anderson led. That was a lot about like getting people into like small scale development, like how do you get started and everything else. And there was a moment during the Q&A where this guy says basically like, well, I love everything you're talking about, but it's like I live in San Francisco, and it's like immediately the room laughed, and so I kind of felt bad for the guy. I mean, he took it all with great humor and everything, and he was making the point that obviously it's incredibly hard in certain places to be able to access the kind of capital you need to just even get started with a small building. But my God, in a place like Akron and some of these cities here, like a young person could do that immediately with very modest means. And it's, I often kind of wonder if maybe that's the opportunity, that's the attraction that people, maybe you don't know what you want to do with your life, but come to a place where you can afford to live and that has some coolness to it, and just do something and get started, and maybe buy your own building for a price that would be shockingly cheap to you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because in a world where, and I think this will only be bigger in the future, where entrepreneurship and people kind of unplugging from maybe like the corporate infrastructure and just remote work and things like that, I do think that if someone does end up here for whatever reason, I think they would see immediately what you're saying and some of the opportunity, especially compared to a lot of places. Because what I have found as a lifelong resident is a lot of people here, this is not as true as it was when I was younger, but it's still a bit true, where the people sometimes can be very down on the place that are from here.
Sure.
But when you go to other places, you get perspective and realize that Akron's a pretty great place. And what I've found to be very true is I've almost never met anybody who actually moved here from somewhere else that didn't like it, and especially didn't like it a lot better than they thought they would. Like, they say they relocated for whatever reason, and they were kind of like, I didn't know what to expect in Northeast Ohio. Almost without an exception, my experience has been that people are like, I really like it here. They'll say it's so green, or they'll say that, I've never heard anyone say winter is their favorite, but like climate change might be changing that. But they really do like things like, the quality of life and the access to urban amenities without, high living costs or bad traffic and things like that.
Yeah. Winter's not so bad. In most of the Midwest, it's really just not that bad. So having 4 seasons is actually kind of nice.
I like it.
Yeah. I feel like there is something there. I remember one time Andreas Duane at one of the CNUs years ago was basically trying to lecture a whole room full of people, saying basically, every young person, you ought to move to Detroit, be a pioneer. Why do you want to waste your time living in Brooklyn or whatever? Be a pioneer, go build something yourself and go do it, and go, rebuild some of these cool cities that need you, that actually need people and would welcome you and would welcome that kind of activity. So I wonder if that's a possibility. And who knows? I mean, there's probably a few million people that are going to lose their jobs over the next decade with AI. So they're going to be looking for something to do.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember our last conversation. At the end we touched a little bit on AI, and I think you had mentioned that you thought it would be a pretty big deal, and I wasn't sure, but I think the more even I've read since our last conversation, I think you're right that especially a lot of those white collar jobs that are more routine in nature, I have a good friend who just lost his job with an insurance company after a long time, and it wasn't maybe directly due to AI, but I think between outsourcing a lot of that work to India and places like that, and AI, I mean, a lot of those compliance and risk management type things, they are pretty easy to automate. So I think you're right that we're going to see a lot of attrition and with a lot of jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that a lot of the white collar world doesn't really know what's about to hit it, and there's been a lot of comfort on the part of all of us who went and got college degrees, got a decent job somewhere, either private or public sector, doesn't matter. And kind of felt like you were, on a path that seemed really secure, as opposed to maybe our friends or family members who had blue-collar jobs that were really decimated by outsourcing and automation. And who knows what the future will hold? But to me, it seems obvious with every passing week and the stories that I read about what AI can already do, that within a decade that a whole lot of people are going to find themselves out of work. And that, new jobs will be created too. That's always the way it happens with technology and new opportunities. But there's a lot of very routine kind of, I think, middle management and lower level professional work that probably will be gone. And so people are going to need something to do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who have like a high lifestyle expectation, shall we say.
Yeah, it's very, very accurate.
All right, so I also wanted to make sure I talked to you. One of the things that you used to write about from time to time that we share was issues related to generations and Gen X. We're both Gen Xers. Most commentary related to generational stereotypes is very shallow and stupid. But there were some things that I think you wrote that always caught my eye and were interesting. And I remember one time you talking about, there is the stereotype of us Gen Xers as being very cynical, which I think is true.
I can't disagree with that.
I would say well earned, but I think there's a lot of cynicism. But I think you also wrote. I remember some stuff one time where you said you thought that cynicism was a problem for us, and that there comes a point where we probably need to get over that, and it may not be productive and healthy for us to maintain that cynicism for too long. I wonder if you could talk a little more about that.
Yeah, and you're right that I've written and thought a lot about, I'm always really interested in a lot of different, sociological type things, I guess, whether that's generations or just culture in general, and what makes people tick as a group. And it is interesting, after, it's been a long time since I read, say, The Fourth Turning, although I read it numerous times, so I can't quite quote it chapter and verse, but I'm pretty conversant in the book. And I read Strauss and Howe's original book that came out of Generations, and some things by Gene Twing, Generation Me, and some other books. But I think what I've realized over time is I think you're right. And I'll touch on the boomers in a second too, if that's okay. But
why not? There's always room to touch on the boomers.
and well, maybe I'll get back to your question. Maybe we'll start on the boomers. We'll go in reverse chronological order. But I used to be, and my parents are boomers, so there are many boomers that I love. But I used to be pretty down on the boomers when I was younger, and what I've come to really appreciate, I think some of the critiques, and the caveat to all of this is we're not talking about individuals, it's a generational tendency with all this, and I'll critique X, we'll get to that, but the thing I've come to appreciate about the boomers as I got older is I do think that overall, for all their faults that are well discussed in the media, I think boomers are very competent overall and very hardworking as a generation. And what I'm realizing as I get older and as they retire, you can kind of see the gaps, that are already being left. And that probably gets to our generation. And I think overall our generation is also quite hardworking and pretty driven in a lot of ways. But I do think, and this gets at what you were asking about, like, I think the cynicism is like faded a little bit with age, but I think the thing that does drive me crazy about Generation X, and I can sometimes even see it in myself, so it's not just critiquing other people, is I do think there's kind of like Generation X's plague has always been like we're kind of like professional critics and always kind of like, kind of goes with the cynicism,
totally
but
true.
Like kind of this detached observer, you know. And I think where it does really hurt us is, especially the world today. I mean, there are a lot of, maybe we'll talk about some of these, but a lot of terrible problems and challenges in our society, and it's just not conducive to sitting on the sidelines and kind of pointing out what's wrong. I mean, that pointing out what's wrong might be necessary to diagnose the problem, but then you have to act. And I think it was like David Foster Wallace, who's also a fellow Gen Xer, that he had a quote about irony, and I'm never going to remember it, but it was something along the lines of like, you can't just sit on the sidelines forever and kind of make snide, ironic comments, and eventually you have to act in the world. And my hope is, I think we still have a couple good years left, hopefully more than a couple, but I think, Generation X really is moving into like the prime leadership roles in our society, and I do think, we have to kind of step up and participate. And I do think we will, but I do think it's fair to say with our generation, like, people are kind of being dragged kicking and screaming. It's almost like the internet meme about I just want to grill, and it's like I think more and more people are really realizing they're going to have to put their spatula down and step up, because we've got a lot of challenges.
It's funny, I think about like there's a lot about that I agree with, and it's difficult because I think there's a cynicism that we have that was probably, I think part of my theory on that was there are those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s and observed a lot of stuff that like we were being sold a certain vision of the way things were in our country, in our cities, and what we saw maybe in reality didn't match that, and but so we didn't really like the marketing brochure so much, and then I think there was the part of the boomer generation, and again, you're right, we're speaking broadly, not of individuals, but I think there was an aspect of when you grew up as a Gen Xer, all you heard about was the boomers. Constantly, like
one more thing about Woodstock.
Oh my God! Like every teacher in school was like a boomer, or just a little bit old, and they all wanted to talk about the '60s, and it was like, it just got so friggin' old. And then I do think it one of the flaws of the boomers that has been touched on by others many times is that a lot of them really kind of held on to where they were in their positions for a very long period of time. So like people groomed them, the generation before them helped groom them to buy into institutions and to take leadership positions. But then a lot of the boomers didn't really do the same for the people that came after them. This was my experience, and there wasn't a lot of the same sort of grooming of our generation to buy into existing institutions, to assume a future leadership role. And so I think a lot of people in our generation were just like, well, fuck it. I'll just go do my own thing, or I'll tune out completely. And I think that's a very natural human response that a lot of us had and still have, and I still have. But you're right in the sense that we do have a lot of issues in our cities and our society that need to be dealt with. And at some point we have to figure out, like, adults have to actually step up to try to help solve those problems.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe I'll roll 2 more generations in here since
Sure.
we're on the topic.
Yeah.
But as a segue into that, just to touch on something that you said, I think you're really right about the failure to kind of pass the torch for that. I mean, that's a very common critique, and I think it is a very justifiable critique of the boomers, again, as a group. And I think, like you said, I don't think a lot of Gen Xers, especially people who are maybe a little more ambitious or motivated, we kind of forged our own way. I don't think a lot of Gen Xers that have accomplished things that didn't necessarily hold them back. But I always feel like I to the extent I've succeeded, that I succeeded without having that from the boomers. But I have always been really conscious of, like, if a younger person ever reaches out to me, say like a student or someone who just started their career, like I really try hard to always talk to them, and I'm always still to this day very flattered, of like, who the hell am I that you're even, I'm really flattered they even want to talk to me, but I never want to be that person, that just pulled up the mat behind them.
Right.
But I think, like, the other interesting dynamic, and this pulls in the other generations, is I think both, like, the boomers and the millennials have certain tendencies in common of, I'd say they have more of like a collective type sense, and which can be good because Gen Xers are kind of lone wolves, more, and individualists. But I think the downside, and I'm seeing it a lot more with the millennials now that they're plenty old. I mean, they're actually getting old now, but they're plenty old to have like a track record. Is I think both they and the boomers like do suffer from like this very idealistic and unrealistic approach to the world.
I would say utopian.
Yeah, utopian is a good word, and I think I'm not blaming either group for our. I mean, I think we're all there's plenty of blame to go around for a lot of the problems in the United States, but I do think like a lot of solutions people put forward to a lot of our problems, especially the boomers or the millennials in this case, are just they're not realistic to what we need. And what I'm kind of seeing is, even though Gen Z is really young, is I think it does have some characteristics in common with like Gen X, where there might be like a little bit more of a pragmatic approach to things. And I don't get me wrong, I think we need like the skills and like all these tendencies are good in some ways and bad in others, and I think we need all 4 adult generations to kind of apply their skills to the problems that we have. But I do think like we do need collective action on things. So that's where I think the boomers and millennials are right. But I think we also need like brutal pragmatism, and I think that's where Gen X especially can help. So my hope is we can kind of all come together and solve a lot of these problems.
Well, maybe that's just like the nature of things, that like every generation rebels on the previous generation.
Very true.
And they have a different mindset. And so you get these kind of generations of dreamers and big dreamers. And, the big dreamers sometimes produce incredible stuff, and then you get a generation that is just more pragmatic because they're tired of the big dreams that people a little older than them always talked about, and then they just ping pong back and forth. I don't know. Maybe that's just how we are.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing that's been on my mind with generations, and full disclosure, like this is, I'm sure an aspect of this is just getting old and having nostalgia, but my wife and I have this conversation all the time. She's a Gen Xer. She's younger. No matter what happens, she'll always be younger than me. I always tell her that. But like, we were kind of talking the other day about just like how normal so many things were, like things that I didn't appreciate at the time when I was growing up, that like I think in so many ways like my childhood in the late 70s and the 80s is like more like the 50s, and I think you even wrote a piece on this, like people can idealize the 50s, and the 50s had all sorts of problems, but there was like, and I see it with like younger people or my nephews and nieces, like I feel bad for them so many times that just the world is so chaotic right now, and there's so much tension and just, acrimony out there, and things aren't working. I mean, we could go do a whole podcast on just maybe one category of things that aren't working, but I really took for granted, I think, like how stable things were like in my childhood, and that's another reason I feel really strongly about wanting to do something while I'm still here to help repair our society, because I don't want, the next generation of people to have to, live in a lot of the, very unstable times and disorder that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and it might be, one way to think about this. Like, it seems like when we ever talk about these things, we end up, you end up like at the crosshairs of like national politics, and it's an easy place to go because that's where all the attention of the media goes. And there's just, when we talk about ideas and problems, we always go there. When you think about it, it's like we're going to, here we are in 2024, and we're going to have two candidates for president that are like, 80 years old, and which is crazy. Like, we still haven't had a major candidate from either party be somebody of our generation.
Yeah.
But so I think it's easy to like go there and say, well, maybe we need people running the country who are our age, but I don't know, maybe not. Maybe the thing for people in our age to really think about is to not focus so much on that, but focus on the local stuff, and really get involved in like you're doing in your community, and give a damn about the place that you're in. And maybe there's a way to join some whatever local civic groups or a school board or a county government or a city government, whatever, to try to help deal with the issues at just a hyper local level.
Yeah, and maybe to link those two things, and just to throw out like a general thought on the national and then take it down to the local, is I've really come to appreciate, I've been reading some stuff or listening to podcasts where like the frame of kind of like what happened in the 20th century is, and I think it's pretty accurate, is like there were three competing ideologies. Like there was fascism and communism and liberalism. And, liberalism with like a big L. It would include what we call conservatives and liberals. Just, belief in liberal democracy, and that, fascism was defeated in World War II, and then communism was defeated in 1991 or 1990, and so like liberalism was kind of like the last man standing, and you get Francis Fukuyama saying it's the end of history, and but I won't do like a political treatise here, but I just say it to say that like I think those are all ideologies, and I think it's very easy living in the United States to not realize that like liberalism itself is an ideology. And I think one of the things that really plagues like our society, and it's both political parties, is there's too much faith in like ideology and not enough. Like I've really come to appreciate just, I know there's disagreement on like what works, but like I just want things like to do things that work. It's like I don't really care if it fits into your political program, and I think, and that's where I think the local is so important, because you do get. At the local level, I mean, unfortunately, ideology creeps into the local a lot too. You go to a city council meeting, and there's a lot of discussion about everything, maybe other than the day-to-day issues that people care about in their own community. But I really think focusing on basic services and basic things that help people. And the final thought on what you said is, as I've gotten older, it sounds like an old, the old man reminiscing now, but like I've made it a point to try to join things. Like I was never really a joiner. I guess that's where I'm a typical Gen Xer too. But I've joined some clubs. I've gotten more active at church and things like that, just because I've kind of come to appreciate as I get older, like the value of being part of a group and doing things as a group and focusing on like tangible things that people can work on together. So
it reminds me, we were talking earlier about Jason Roberts from the Better Block, and he always had a slide in his presentation, his standard presentation, where he went to like meet with the Rotary Club or whatever, and he'd put this like image up on the screen of all these people, and people would like laugh because it was like intended to like initially make people laugh, and then he immediately would say, no, what you don't understand is these are the people you need to talk to. It's like these are the people in your community who are actually trying to do things and trying to like have a better community, and it's like that's what we all need to be doing, is trying to connect with people like that.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, a couple of the groups I'm a part of, we were talking about this in the car. I mean, I'm one of the younger guys, but I definitely have a lot more respect and consciousness now of like, look, I want to be around as these people get older, to learn from them, and like kind of accept the torch they're passing and be a person that like younger people can count on. Like I spoke to some students at the university the other day, and I was asked to give them a piece of advice, which was kind of like a daunting task, but the thing that I said was like, be someone that other people can rely on. That I think that's really what's missing a lot today, and that can only help you and help other people too. It's all easier said than done, of course, but
yeah. That's true. Do you need another beer?
Yeah, I wouldn't say no.
Why don't we do that? I can pause it.
Philosophy really does a great job of articulating a lot of the challenges with just that, gigantic scale that we're trying to do everything at in our society. And I think we're, even though that message, I think, hasn't, through no fault of strong towns, hasn't percolated out very much, I think we're going to be forced into it by the failure of, there's so many giant things that just are failing, and our institutions are failing. And so I think the strong towns message is more important than ever. Working at like a small scale, granular things, mobilizing people, say at the neighborhood level. So I think that's really great, and definitely, and I'm confident we'll continue. I think the only critique I would say is like, I think some of the strong towns content I've read, and maybe this is more just going back to my time working for a city, some of it, like, I definitely appreciate what's being said, but like when you're in the trenches in municipal government, I think sometimes some of the things that are advocated are like, they're very great like ideas in theory, but are just hard to operationalize. And that's not to say that they can't be operationalized, but like sometimes cities, like they really are in like they have to operate in political reality, and God knows they can make a lot of mistakes, but I think sometimes like I'll try to give like a concrete example, like say, this actually happened in Akron, and I think Strong Towns did weigh in on it, where we had maybe the most infamous dead mall in the United States.
Yeah.
Rolling Acres Mall. We didn't get a chance to drive by.
Wait, was that where the Amazon?
Yeah, did you drive?
I actually drove by it.
Because you probably got rerouted from all of our freeway concerns, so you saw it. And that mall was a horrible albatross around the neck of the city. And just, I got interviewed by Vice magazine, the guys went and skateboarded through the mall afterward. But it was a terrible eyesore, and just, it was like your typical dead mall, right? And so the city got the opportunity to work with Amazon, and the city had given it some tax breaks, like those things happen. And I think sometimes the strong towns critique came out like, well, it's terrible, it could be something better than Amazon. And I don't even, on a certain level, I don't disagree with that. Like, theoretically it could be something better than Amazon, but I think like the real world position of politics and working, with the expectations of the citizenry was, look, the opportunity came for them to buy it. It did create 2,000 jobs. They are, are Amazon jobs the best jobs in the world? No, but they're, in today's environment, they're paying a living wage with health care and so forth. and most importantly, like our residents really needed those jobs. And again, in a perfect world, I wish that we had clean tire plants back, or other other types of jobs for working class people. But I think sometimes, I think the strong towns approach, my one critique would be it can be very theoretical at times, and sometimes like the position people find themselves in, like working in politics and so forth. Sometimes you really do have to pick between like good, better, and best, and bad, worse, and worst.
Yeah.
And it's just how it is.
Yeah, sometimes you're dealing with what's the least bad solution for a certain problem.
Right, and you do have time constraints sometimes. Yeah. You can't necessarily wait 20 years for the ideal solution.
Yeah. That hearing you talk about that, I'm going to go on a totally different tangent. I thought that was good, but it makes me kind of think about. So when you mentioned like you wish we had like clean tire plants back here, I'm not part of this conversation. You live in this world immersed of what used to be the tire capital of the world. Do people talk about I guess most of the tires these days are probably made in China or Mexico, and like what would need to happen to bring a lot of that employment back to a place like Akron? Is that ever part of a conversation here?
I would say that I think that this kind of gets back to the generational conversation, not about cohorts of boomers versus millennials or Gen X or anything, but just about kind of like cohorts of people aging out. That like in Akron, say in the 90s, there were tons of retired or retired rubber workers, or people who lost their jobs when the industry went belly up, or people whose parents or grandparents. And so like the living memory of that industry, even though the plants had been gone, say in 1995, like most of the industry was already gone 15 to 20 years before that. But there was a lot of talk of like, we got to find a way to get like tire plants back. Mm-hmm. But I think now people don't really reminisce for it at all, or for any sort of heavy industry. But most of the plants actually, most of the tires are still made in the United States, believe it or not. Okay. Many like Bridgestone tires and so forth, like a lot of them are made in Japan. There are a lot of tires made in Europe, but most of the industry actually moved to the south.
Did it?
So yeah, a lot of the tire factories that were in Akron moved to like Tennessee, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana. So
they went to non-union.
Yeah,
states,
basically we're sitting here in the shadow of a former tire factory. I can actually touch the brick of the wall as we sit here. It was really the main reason the tire industry left Akron was the outmoded buildings. So these are 6-7 story buildings that tire manufacturing all went to like one story in one end, out the other, with semis transporting everything. But the single biggest issue was probably the union wages. That Akron was really, probably by some measures I've read, like the most heavily unionized, or one of the most heavily unionized cities in the United States. And the rubber workers had a 6-hour day, 6 days a week, 36-hour work week, really great benefits. Great for them, kudos. But the downside was that the management, like they kind of, once the plants got old and it was coming up with like, am I going to rebuild the tire plant is one story where there's not enough land here in the city of Akron and pay people all those wages, or am I going to move it to Alabama and put it outside of Gadsden or Tyler, Texas, where some of the plants went? Like, they just built new stuff in the Sun Belt and paid lower wages. So
yeah. Operationally here, one of the things I've always been curious about is, because we also in Kansas City have a lot of multi-story former industrial buildings from the same era. I'm always curious about, is there a way to reinvent modern industry to work with multi-story buildings? And probably a pipe dream, but I don't know. I feel like there have to be some uses for that would work. But I guess in that era, then what probably happened was they had the multi-story operation, and then it was more tied to the railroads for distribution.
Yeah, that's definitely correct. I mean, like, one thing that's interesting in Akron is, these plants back, almost all these plants, these buildings we're sitting in the shadow of, I think were built, around 1905, 1910. And at that time, it was all served by rail. But there was a lot of, a lot of the interstates when they were first built in Akron. Like we had when I was a kid, like this just spaghetti bowl of like, there would be places on the freeway in Akron where there would be like 3 exits within a mile and a half. And it was like the tire factories really lobbied for like an interchange, at almost every plant that they had. And so trucks did play a big role, with a lot of these plants as trucking got really big. And Akron was actually one of the biggest trucking centers in the United States too. It's kind of a forgotten that the city was such a big hub for trucking. But I think that like in Northeast Ohio today, we do still have a lot of industry. I mean, it's a shadow of what it was, but it's all in the suburbs, and it's all, low-rise buildings and industrial parks, mostly between Akron and Cleveland, or between Akron and Canton. There's virtually like no manufacturing almost in a city like Akron. I mean, we do have some, but even in the parts of the city of Akron we have it, it's in like suburban style industrial parks kind of on the edges of the city.
Yeah, it's amazing how really it's tying it back really to Strongtown's conversation, how the change in infrastructure really drove the change in industry in so many respects, because the change in infrastructure to the highway system and to enable long distance trucking flattened everything out literally. And it made a lot of the old vertical process just kind of obsolete, which is, wild to think about that. Like infrastructure is in many ways what drove that.
Yeah. And I do believe that a city like Akron is as hard as it might seem right now to envision this. I even have a little bit of trouble envisioning it, but I actually do think manufacturing is still in our future. I think we touched on this in the last conversation, but I do think a lot of manufacturing is going to be coming back to the United States because of all the instability in the world, tensions in the Middle East, tensions in Ukraine and China. And I think that a lot of wonks are kind of talking about reshoring. But I think beyond that, which I do think is going to happen over time, that I think and maybe I'm going to sound like James Howard Kunstler here, but I love him. I mean, he's curmudgeonly, and I don't.
He is the ultimate curmudgeon,
yes,
but very entertaining.
Yes, and I think
and he has actually been right about a number of things.
He has, and but he makes this point a lot, and whether you go full on, catastrophe, like he does catastrophize a lot, and
he does.
That's something I do hope he's wrong about, But I do think his general thought on the future is pretty right about, both the instability I was talking about, but also the breakdown of large systems. I do think that we are going to return in the United States over time into a lot more local manufacture, just things like baking bread or processing food in general, or things that they're manufacturing that kind of have to be for that local area that you would have in any decent sized population center. And so I do think in a city like Akron, whether we get jobs back from China or whatever, I do think the future is maybe more locally oriented manufacturing. And I do think that can be done, in the city limits, and maybe not exactly in a building like the one behind us, but in kind of modest buildings like manufacturers with maybe 50 employees, or not necessarily the giant scale of the steel mills and rubber plants we had in Northeast Ohio 60 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and 3D printing might have something to do with that as well.
Right.
If that technology continues to advance, as I suspect it will, that might be a catalyst to relocalize, a lot of manufacturing. Because if you can spit stuff out very affordably with a 3D printer in your own community, why ship it from China?
Right.
So the last question I have, which actually kind of ties into something you said earlier as well, I'm curious about the advice that you would give to younger people, especially to younger people who are interested in becoming planners, like the career path that you had, who really want to be a city planner and are considering that for whether public sector like you did, maybe private sector to be a planner or something like that. What kind of things do you think about like that you would tell like your 20-year-old version of yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I do think that and you and I were talking a little bit about this when we first met up today, that I think in our profession now there's a ton of groupthink, and kind of like an echo chamber about a lot of current topics that I wouldn't call them fads exactly. I mean, some might be fads, but everything from things that I'm not critiquing these things. I totally agree with them, making more walkable streets, form-based codes to have buildings closer to the street and the parking in the back. I'm all for those things. I think they're great. But there is a little bit of echo chamber around even those things. But I just think they're like urbanists in general. This might be going back to the Twitter days more, but it's where you would see it a lot. But I mean, it's a manifestation of reality. I think people can just be very dogmatic and rigid in their thinking about cities, and I know it's a cliche, but letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I do think my advice to a planner would be sure, stay current on that. So there's nothing wrong with going to APA and seeing what they have to say about bike lanes or even some of the I think where there's a lot of groupthink is around some of the equity issues and things like that. But there's nothing wrong with participating in those conversations or being current. But I would say to have a little bit of independence of thought, and especially in whatever place that you're working in, translate those ideas to what it kind of gets back to that pragmatism of what will actually work in the community that you have. I mean, this is a real world example here in Akron. When I worked for the city, and it was hard to get it the right answer for this problem, if it is a problem. But when we did the tax abatement citywide, we really started getting a lot of housing construction, and it's continued, and it's great. It's the program I'm proudest of from the time that I was there. But we started having a lot of conversations about design standards for the homes, and we all agreed we should have some, but there was a lot of back and forth about how persnickety are we going to get with the placement of the garage or the porch. And my point to even some of my staff was the imaginary house that doesn't exist is never going to be as good as the real house that maybe is less than perfect. And you don't want to accept just an awful looking house maybe that might quickly lose its value. But at the same time, I mean, we have to be realistic. We don't live in one of the hottest real estate markets. Developers who build here, even with the tax abatement, are they're making a sacrifice. A lot of them just still won't. They're why would I sell that house for $250,000 when I could sell it for $400,000 in your neighboring community? So I think the reason I use that as an example is just I think there is it's easy to maybe buy in too much into the latest urbanist fad but miss the plot of what will actually help your I want homes that people can live in here in the city, even if it doesn't have the right kind of front porch, or the garage door that's little bit doesn't have enough windows, or protrudes a little too far from the front facade. I mean, I just think that's the kind of trade-offs, especially in like an older city that doesn't have a strong market, that you have to work with.
Yeah. Well, as an architect, I'm totally offended at that commentary.
Many of my discussions were with architects.
That's okay. No.
And the world needs architects.
No, I agree with that. I think letting the perfect be the enemy of the good is a huge problem we all struggle with, and you want to push for as high a quality as you can possibly get, but there is always a point where you've got to draw a line and say, the point is to actually get things done.
Right, that's what I would always say, and I know it's easier said than done, but my direction to my architect was always, let's get them to build like the absolute best house that they can, that they will still build. And it's like, and it's a hard line to walk.
Yeah. All right, well, hey, man, I love people who love where they live and their community, and so I just really appreciate that about you. I would never have come to Akron, Ohio without meeting you and the chance to talk with you. So this has been really great, man. I really thank you for everything today.
I really appreciate it, and come back anytime. And any listeners who want a tour of Akron, look me up, and I'll be happy to take you around.
And you should be lucky to get it if you get the chance. It's a great tour. All right, thanks everybody. If there's a future like Strong Towns gathering in Kansas City, can I get you to come?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, good.
I've only been. I was telling you, I've only been to Kansas City once, and I would love to go back. And this time, I am crossing the border to Kansas because I got to see a lot of the Missouri side, but I'd like to duck over to Kansas for at least an hour. So.
Yes, as Sarah Palin would say, I can see it from my porch. So, all right, thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Yep.